CES coverage is sponsored by GoDaddy.com, the leader in domain names and web hosting services. New GoDaddy customers can save 25% by using promo code CES25 at GoDaddy.com.
Continuing coverage of the Consumer Electronics Show, Jeffrey Powers with Geekazine and the Tech Podcast Network. We're still here in the Visteon tent here on the outside of the Convention Center, and we're still with Upton here. How you doing, Upton?
Very good, thanks.
And we're working, but we just talked about tactile feel and mixing the tactile and gestures and touch screens. But now we want to take it to a technology of touch screens and more to the point, your iPad and how you can actually integrate that into your car. And that's what this dashboard is. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So this is a really cool concept that we came up with that basically said, instead of having the radio talk to your cell phone, how about having your portable consumer electronic device actually be the primary user interface for your onboard vehicle electronic systems? So what we have here is we've installed an iPad, but it really could be any Wi-Fi device, Wi-Fi enabled device. And essentially what this is doing is we have your climate controls down here. We can play music either from onboard device or from a USB. We have radio, and what I'm doing is I can actually send commands by Wi-Fi, take control of the embedded radio inside the vehicle, and change volume, whatever else, and everything plays over the vehicle speakers. So essentially this becomes a detachable large touchscreen for your entire vehicle cockpit controls. You can also run web apps if you happen to have connectivity on the device, or things like additional vehicle information, and obviously things like phone. Now, we wouldn't necessarily propose eliminating all the switches and knobs and buttons, and we still would have redundant control mechanisms in the case that this device wasn't present in the vehicle. So, for instance, voice controls, you'd still have those, steering wheel controls, and maybe a handful of traditional buttons and knobs.
But you would end up putting them in different places, like the steering wheel, like a passenger door, or something like that, because it doesn't need to be here, because you can put that there.
Absolutely. What it really allows you to do is kind of change the way you design cockpits, because you traditionally had single DIN and double DIN electronic modules that traditionally filled the center cockpit area, as well as climate and HVAC devices. Because those modules can be moved elsewhere, and this becomes a somewhat mobile command and control device, you can actually re-architecture traditional cockpits and vehicles to have a very different look and feel.
And you can also create stations, so you can have one up in the front dash, you can have one up in the back dash.
Yep. Yeah, true. In many vehicles today, you've got rear aux controls for HVAC, you've got rear aux controls for radio, multimedia. This becomes basically an onboard vehicle remote, so you can have multiple Wi-Fi devices. Maybe the kids in the back seat have iTouches or Android phones, that type of thing. You install an app and you can communicate through Wi-Fi. And again, each one of those devices has its own network security, and so it's linked and paired to your vehicle. So when you're in your vehicle, you have good secure communication with onboard systems.
And with a link, of course, if you have a would-be thief that just happens to have an iPad with them to hook up into the car, that will get a little bit more difficult for him to or her.
Absolutely, you lock out some of a would-be thief's commands and controls. There's really nothing to steal from a radio standpoint, because the radio is a silver box embedded in the vehicle somewhere else, and also they don't have the passcodes to tie into your electronic systems.
Now the big question, I know you've been asked all weekend long, is when is this going to be into a vehicle?
Well, the thing is, it is a concept that we're showing right now, but there's actually been quite a bit of interest, and we're really excited about that. We already make the silver box radios that I talked about that have many of the features in them, whether it's HD radio, satellite, and everything else. So essentially, what we need to add is Wi-Fi enabled encryption, and once you have that communication, then it's fairly straightforward to add this functionality in. So.
All right. And Visteon.com is where people go, correct?
Correct. At www.visteon.com.
All right. Perfect. Upton, thank you very much for your time. For the Tech Podcast Network, my name is Jeffrey Powers.